I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside, it's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, "No, no, 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 we're going to do this." And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off road ability, as well as its robust interior, are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show.
So last week, we spoke about running for president and the
Right.
problems facing the country today.
Yeah.
And I mentioned how I'm running for president
Yes.
officially on the Federal Election Commission. It's half joke, half serious. And I didn't say what I stood for. But Jay, what
Yeah.
else did we speak about last
We
week?
speak about the difference between prime minister and president.
Oh, yeah, and fascism and all that kind of stuff.
And we spoke about what happened if president and vice president died. And then we also spoke about how government organization is kind of mafia-like.
Yeah, that's right. Although it's not, we concluded. But then
Yeah.
we also talked about inflation last week
Yes.
and what's causing it, where the Federal Reserve might be wrong. And we talked about how, I hate to sound like a libertarian or any particular party, but really when government interferes in things, it kind of messes things up. And we looked at extreme examples like the difference between Stalinist Russia and Maoist China and the United States, which are sort of the most extreme examples. But today, I promised I would talk about the most important issue and what I feel like is a unique stand on it. And I figured I would talk about it today. Let's say they did a poll of
Mhm.
everybody in the country and they asked people, what are the 5 most important problems you would like to see the president address? What do you think the answers would be?
Okay, I would think the first one would be the student loan, right? Because people would just want more money. So that's
But
one.
there's 300 million people in the US. Let's say 200 million after kids and stuff. There's only 33 million people with student loan debt. So it's not going to be the most important issue of the country.
No, but that's what I've been reading for the past 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, student loan.
I agree. It is a massive problem. You're right. But it's not the most important problem facing
No.
the US.
Yeah, so 5, right? You said 5.
Yeah.
And gun control, and then the economy, the price hike, the Federal Reserve interest rate. But from what I understand, government has nothing to do with it, right? Because Federal Reserve is supposed to be neutral.
Right, but it is the government though. Federal Reserve is federal.
Right.
It's part of the government.
It is the government. Okay. That and
I mean, the president appoints the head of the Federal Reserve.
And the war, like how would president handle the war outside of United States? Personally, I think they put too much money in the Ukraine. Whether it's money or whether it's equipment and stuff like that.
By the way, it's an interesting thing. Like Let's just take Ukraine as an example
Right.
and war as an example. I think in the modern world, it's really hard. It might be impossible now to invade another country and win. Like, look at the US and Afghanistan. We were
Right.
in Afghanistan for 18 years, and basically we were defeated. Like we
Yeah.
didn't,
Yeah.
maybe we got rid of Al Qaeda, but the Taliban's just as bad as they ever were, and they're gonna take control of Afghanistan. Like basically, I don't want to say we did nothing because we did a lot, and a lot of lives were lost on both sides, and it's a sad thing that had to happen. And 9/11, of course, we had to have some retribution for that, but
Mhm.
we couldn't fully invade basically one of the weakest countries in the world.
No.
And Russia invading Ukraine. It appears Russia is not going to be successful, and countries just shouldn't invade other countries
No.
anymore unless I don't know, unless what? Like it just seems like it's a very hard thing to do.
Unless they break, was it the agreement that's a peace treaty, then that's the excuse to invade, right? Or to have a war with
Well,
like,
I don't know, but then again, you're never going to win. What's the
yeah.
last time a country invaded another country and they won?
No, I didn't. Was it Russia? Russia was the last country to invade other country, but I don't know if they win.
Yeah, I mean, they invaded Ukraine and they didn't win. They haven't been winning yet.
Right, but
So,
before that, was it Crimea or whatever?
well, that was part of Ukraine, and this is still kind of,
Right,
I guess, yes, sometimes with diplomacy, some country doesn't want to fight, and they say, here, just take this, and then it's over.
but let me ask you this: why is it impossible to win now? Is it because the war is
Because there's
because
more
of the?
sophisticated technology and equipment. You have
Mm,
you have anti-aircraft missiles that actually hit aircraft. They're like guided missiles that hit aircraft. They're anti-tank missiles. Tanks are so strong, but now there are missiles that could destroy tanks. And
right,
it's very hard. No matter what equipment you have, it's very hard to fight the anti-equipment.
right,
And no matter what, like you could say, "Oh, we should or we shouldn't give money to Ukraine." And look, it's been a very good thing that Ukraine hasn't been,
right.
taken over. It sends a
Yeah,
message to anybody trying to invade anyone else. But even if the US didn't give money to Ukraine, a lot of other countries did
exactly.
and were.
Yeah,
And it's unclear if Russia had the resources to begin with. Like right now, they're sending people who have just no skills at all in the military to be in the military. But I want to say the most important issues, number one, is the economy. 33% of people care about the economy. And they care about recession, taxes, inflation, lack of money, unemployment, gap between rich and poor, oil prices. The money is the most important thing. Number two is sort of a BS one, the government slash poor leadership. That just seems like a partisan issue. Like no matter who's in charge, the other half is going to say that's a big problem. Number three is immigration. 11% of people
yes.
care about immigration, and that includes all the immigrants like you,
Hmm.
Jay,
Yeah.
and then also all the people who care about immigration and so on. And then after that, there's 3% care about crime and violence, and only 3% think the most important problem is foreign policy, foreign aid, focus overseas.
What?
Only 2% think the most important problem in the U.S. is the situation with Russia. 2% think abortion is the most important problem. Situation with China, 1%. I think that Robin is that entire 1%. So
Well, let me ask you this, James. Let me ask you this. I would think it's a good idea to have a president just for the states and then a president that deal with foreign policy. Because I felt like that it's hard for one person. Obviously, one person can wear multiple hats, but isn't it better if you have one person focus like family, you know?
that is a very good point, Jay. In fact, there's almost, but not quite, a precedent for this,
Oh,
which
really?
is to start off, Richard Nixon
Hmm.
resigned as president in August of 1974. He was about to be impeached. He decided to resign instead. And Gerald Ford, who was his vice president, took over. And so from 1974 to January 1977, Gerald Ford was president, one of the shortest terms of presidency ever. He did not win re-election, so he lost to Jimmy Carter. And then in 1980, Ronald Reagan was the Republican nominee for president, and he was strongly considering Gerald Ford to be the vice president. So the
Mm.
former president almost became the vice president. That had never happened before. And Gerald Ford's terms were, he said he would do it, but only if he was virtually president for all things foreign relations, and Ronald Reagan would remain president for all things domestic. And Reagan said, "Get out of here. I don't even need you."
What?
And Ford did not become vice president. A young man and former director of the CIA named George Bush became vice president, and the rest is history.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's an interesting thing. Typically what happens is the Secretary of State is sort of the main person in charge of all foreign relations, but he still has to report to the president. He can't do anything without
Right.
the president. So it is the case. I mean, we have another precedent, which is that George W. Bush, he brought on Dick Cheney to be his vice president. And Dick Cheney was roughly almost, in terms of power, almost it was at the same level as W, and particularly on foreign issues. Like, it was Dick Cheney who mostly encouraged like the invasion of Iraq, for instance, in part because he had worked for the older Bush, and it was, the older Bush had a grudge against Saddam Hussein, and and so on. But it's never it's an interesting idea, but you still need one person to kind
Right.
of say, like Truman makes it as a famous quote, "The buck stops here." Like you always have to, the president is in charge. So if someone is to blame, it's always the president. Like,
Gotcha.
a lot of people, regardless of how you feel, whether Trump is a good guy, a bad guy, a fascist, the greatest president, like some people have extreme views on either side when it comes to Trump. There was an issue that I really cared about in the pandemic, which was, I don't think we should have locked down the businesses. It's unclear if any lives were saved. You could have done it in a better way that didn't put the economy into a
Right.
situation which created the economy we're in now. And Republicans will blame the Democrats. The Democrats will blame the Republicans. Like, what the Democrats wanted and voted for businesses to be shut down. But ultimately, the buck stops with the president. Some things I would say that are in the positive column for Trump, but this thing is very much in the negative column. And there's never one president that does everything bad and everything good. And that includes Nixon, that includes Trump, that includes Jimmy Carter, who many think was an awful president. That includes Lyndon Baines Johnson, that includes possibly the worst president ever, Warren G. Harding or Herbert Hoover. Everybody does some good and some bad. And so definitely one
Yeah.
of the bad things, maybe the worst thing in Trump's administration, was the lockdown in the economy. Even though he would say it's not his fault that the Democrats pressured him into it, that was a negative thing. I could say positive things too, but then we get into this area where people are religious about the positive and negative of
Right.
Trump, and I don't want to get into that. But I will tell you the most important thing. I agree with the people who say the economy is the most important problem facing the country,
Yep.
facing any country, because there's a saying, when a country is developing, you either trade bullets or dollars. And, if a country can't develop economically, they're going to end up going to war in order to get the economic benefits of war, like
Right.
taking over another country's resources. This was the historical reason for war always, is that, oh, they have more food in that country. Let's invade them and take over all their food.
Right. Isn't US also like the leader of the economy, right? Like everyone's looking at US for economy leadership and economy guidance.
Right. Like, here's the thing, every country has their own currency. And if people demand your currency because they trust your economy, that's the best way to avoid inflation. So, the best way to avoid real inflation is when other countries want your stuff.
Right.
And, that makes the economy grow faster than it's not that inflation's bad, it's that wages need to grow faster than inflation. The economy needs to grow faster than inflation. So, people always say, "Oh, inflation's X and that's bad." There's no black and white to this, but you basically have to figure out a way to give more people money. And this is where a lot of people get it wrong. You can't just say, "Oh, we're going to do a bailout of blah, blah, blah." You have to have a justification for it that will make the economy grow, or else there will be inflation. Now, the US is the most trusted economy. One, because we take, for the most part, we take private property rights very seriously. If you have an idea and you patent it, then you make money when someone steals your idea. If
Right.
you own a home, somebody else can't just go in your home and say, "This is my home now." The government can't even do that. I mean, unless you didn't pay your taxes or whatever. The other thing about economy is the United States just is where all the innovation happens. It's the biggest economy because, not because we sell a lot of toilet paper, we don't. It's because we sell our inventions. Like, biotech, now AI, robots, all these things. Even if we outsource to China the development of these things, all the iPhones are built in China, but the US is the one that sells the iPhones. The Apple is located in the US. They're not located in China. They buy the components and the pieces that put together into the iPhone, but Apple's the one that actually sells the iPhone. So
Right.
the US by far is the biggest economy. 20 people say, "Oh, China's growing faster. They're going to beat us." Maybe, but the US is at $23 trillion in national GDP. China is at 17 trillion and Japan, number 3, is at 5 trillion and Germany is 4th.
Gotcha. So like the difference is pretty huge.
And India, by the way, growing fast, is 5th.
Oh wow, that's crazy. Also, just now when you mentioned toilet paper, you say toilet paper doesn't really make money. I just look it up. In 2023, do you know how much revenue in toilet paper segments amount to?
No.
$107.4 billion.
Wow, toilet paper. You're
Yep.
saying there were $107 billion worth of toilet paper was sold?
Apparently so, according to what's called Statista.com. And the market is expected to grow annually by 5.92% CAGR 2023 to 2027.
Well, there you go. So toilet paper is an important part of the economy, but I would argue that technology is a much bigger part of the economy.
Probably. Yeah, because like technology actually push the civilizations forward, right?
Yeah, and also technology is something that you can't beat us on because we're so
Mhm.
far ahead in terms of research. Like biotech, we are so far ahead of everyone else on biotech that it's hard for anybody to catch up. So
Yeah,
it's really important to create an economy that supports technological innovation. And this is related to immigration too. Like if more and more, let's say, Asian people decide to go to graduate school in India or China and then stay in India and China and build their businesses there, that hurts the US economy because traditionally the smartest people in these countries would come to the US for graduate school, then move to Silicon Valley, start a company, make tens of millions of dollars, hire tens of thousands of people, create inventions that we sell around the world, and so on. But fewer and fewer Asian people are going to graduate school here, which means fewer and fewer people, Asian people, are starting companies here and so on. But immigration is not the most important issue. As I mentioned, it's one of the most important issues.
right.
But the economy in general, that's one part of the economy.
Sorry, I just want to add something on the immigrations real quick. So in 2011, Dr. Michio Keiko, remember Dr. Michio Keiko? He came on the
Michio
show.
Keiko, yeah. We had him on we had him on when William Shatner came on, and we surprised William Shatner by
But he's
having
not
Michio
happy.
Keiko come on and come up on the stage and tell us how to use quantum mechanics to make teleportation.
Right.
But then Michio Keiko, I did ask him, and Michio Keiko admitted that if you do teleport, probably you die, and just a replica of you
Yep.
is teleported. So it's not really worth it.
Right. So in 2011, Dr. Michio Kaku on a stage did mention that, America has a secret weapon. America's secret weapon is H1B. That's how, the innovations because of the H1B, because people stay here, they get the H1B. H1B is a visa for, for immigrants. And, that's how they make all the innovations in science and, technology. But like you mentioned, like more and more people decided to leave US to go to India and China to get their degrees and to start a business there. Even Dubai and was it Israel has a huge startup initiative?
Yeah. Right, right. So look, and that's a good thing too. It's better for the world if the entire world develops.
Right.
But it's still important for the US to remain first. Again, that's why people buy oil with US dollars. That's why the US dollar is the most trusted currency. And it's why our inflation in the US is not even greater than it is now, despite all the money that's been printed during the pandemic and the Great Recession and so on.
Right.
But so that's a part of the picture. But I kind of think the biggest part of the picture is just give people more money.
Mm.
So, but not in a way, not through bailouts. And I'm going to describe what I mean. This is going to be related to taxes. Here's the problem with taxes: is that let's say, Jay, I decide, okay, I'm going to take 10% more I'm going to raise your taxes 10%. And what am I, the government, going to do with that extra money? I have to do something with it, right? The U.S. spends more than it makes. So every dollar that's taxed is spent every year. So I'm going to do something. Let's say I give that money to the Department of Education. Oh, okay. You say, well, here's 10% more of my salary. It's going to a good resource, education. Here's the problem. And I just say the Department of Education randomly, but I could say this about any department. Since the Department of Education started, the quality of American education has gone down. Like student loan debt has gone up faster than inflation every single year since the Department of Education started. Tuitions have gone up faster than inflation every single year since the Department of Education started. Literacy rates compared to the rest of the world have gone down every
Oh,
single
wow.
year since the Department of Education started. Doesn't mean everything they've done is bad. It just means you, Jay, could have probably spent this money in a more useful way than the government. So why do the government need to raise your taxes 10%? The government is not the best decision makers. We already know. We already know the importance of growing the economy. That's what keeps
Right.
your currency strong, and it what keeps inflation down. That's the importance of a growing economy. We know that the government spending does not grow the economy as much as technological innovation, and that in general, politicians and bureaucrats are not entrepreneurs. Like you look at Federal Express, versus the post office. It used to be the post office would be the primary way you would send packages, but now Fred Smith, this business school graduate, he had this idea that he can find cheap planes and have hubs all around the country. He could find cheap planes to send packages in one day. And he created a more efficient service than the US government. It's a classic example. So taxes are a real important issue. And for every dollar, either private industry gets the dollar or the government gets the dollar. Either you get an extra dollar, Jay, to spend, or the government gets your dollar. When
Right.
you get an extra dollar, you buy a newspaper with it. The newspaper guy buys flour with it. The flour guy, maybe it's part of his Netflix subscription. So a dollar moves around the economy many times before it kind of dies out. So it's very important. We always complain about the gap between the rich and the poor, and that is an issue because people get angry when they see other people making so much money. But the real important issue is corporations and individuals like you, Jay. If you had, everybody who has more money, they get entrepreneurial. Particularly, more startups are starting than ever. Startups create inventions and innovations like nobody. No, like the government made the internet, but the internet didn't become used until basically 25 or 26 years after the internet was created. People started making websites on this new thing, the web, and that became this huge part of the economy. And that was done by private industry. It was not done by the government. You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So, I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love prize picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get two memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply.
Let me ask you something. But before I ask you something, I just want to tag on to the post office one. In February 2023, USPS is closing 40 post offices.
Yeah, I mean, the post office is just
We're losing money.
It's because people can't afford to send simple letters. But by the way, when was the last time you sent a letter? You sent email.
Yeah.
So again, a private industry, by the way, did not invent email. Okay.
No.
It was invented in universities and it was government funded. But, AOL, let's say, was the first big public use of email. And this was in the early 90s. And that was created by private industry. Steve Case, he wasn't the founder of AOL, but he was one of the first. He was the second or third CEO there, and he was the one who really made it huge. He basically popularized the use of email. That was done in private industry. Now, let's say AOL was taxed 90%. 90% of their profits were taxed. Well, they would never have been able to hire a Steve Case or to build the tools they needed to do to make email popular. And what would the government have done with that money? Well, a big chunk of the government budget is defense. So it would have gone into war and tanks and things like
Right.
that. So
Well,
so again, the market is a better decider of what to do with dollars than the government is. Just like we discussed last time,
right.
Russia couldn't feed its population because they tried to plan everything from beginning to end. Whereas New York City also can't feed its population, but that's okay because, oh, some people want to buy food from Walmart. Some people want to buy food from this place, from that place. So the market decides how supply and demand are met as opposed to one government leader.
Right.
So again, private industry having money. So let me tell you, here's my plan to drastically reduce and simplify
Right.
taxes in a
Uh,
way that's fair to both poor and rich.
I have one question, real questions. This could be a really dumb questions or a silly question.
There are no dumb questions, as they say, although sometimes, maybe you ask dumb questions, but
Can taxation be privatized?
that's an interesting question. Like, meaning make the IRS like a business that the government hires.
Or like our tax, right? At least, so we have like how, I don't even know how much percentage that we give to federal. At least a percentage of the percentage that we give to federal on federal tax maybe should go to be privatized and to have more startup or to have a better amenities for the country or stuff like that.
Well, it still depends whether it's privatized or not. What percentage? The goal would be to lower the percentage
Right.
of taxes people pay. So whether it's privatized or not doesn't matter.
Right. What if the whole taxation is privatized?
But what do you mean? Like, would people pay less taxes?
So let's say if you privatize, right? Like, so let's say if the country big profit out of this, eventually it will lead to the lessons of the tax, right? Because if the economy grow, then the tax will go down.
Well, it's unclear. Maybe if we don't know. We have no idea. Like,
Mm,
you would have to have a plan to reduce taxes. So whether it's
gotcha.
privatized or not doesn't really matter as much. It might be more. Here's the problem with taxes, and this is related to your question: is that the higher taxes are, the more people avoid taxes.
Mm,
The more tax evasion there is a big
right.
problem. Like, there's billions every year, maybe hundreds of billions that are not collected in taxes because the higher taxes are, the more people avoid paying taxes, either through some loopholes or just illegally. So the goal would be, again, privatized or not, the goal would be to reduce taxes
Mm,
so that the government actually can collect more taxes and maybe not lose so much money, and people don't have to spend as much on their taxes. So when people don't spend as much on taxes, they either buy things like food, shelter, technology, and so on, or they start companies and hire people and give people money by creating jobs. So let's just discuss. I would say the big issue is how to reduce taxes. Oh, wait, Jay, you had a second question.
no, that's the only questions.
Oh, okay.
That was the only questions. The other one is like a silly, like a throwback because the post office one, the post office issue sort of was in Seinfeld. I don't know if you remember.
No.
There was a Seinfeld episodes where Kramer just go around and say, let's stop using the post office and we start using faxes and email instead. And then Newman is like, Kramer, what are you doing here? You're making me out of jobs or something like that.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I mean, the post office used to be like one of the most reliable places for a job. Like, it was total job security. You got a great pension. By the
Right,
way, great book to read. Charles Bukowski's first novel called Post Office,
right.
about his life as a mailman, and it's a great novel.
All right,
Novel based on his life.
now back
So
to your policy on taxes.
yes. So first off, how much does the government actually collect from taxes? So right now, like last year, the government collected about $4.5 trillion from income taxes, corporate taxes, payroll taxes, and estate taxes. So if you lower this amount, if you lower the amount of taxes that are collected, you have to somehow replace that amount. So 4.5 trillion. Keep that money in your mind. That's how much we collect from income taxes, corporate taxes, payroll taxes, and estate taxes. Now, how much does the government spend? We spend about $6 trillion per year. So we borrow money every year, almost every year. There are a few years where we don't borrow money because the government's doing very well, but in general, the government spends about $6 trillion per year.
Okay, do you mind explaining how does government borrow money? Is it the same as printing money?
No, The government can print money. We have the power to do that, but we have to be very careful about that because we printed a lot of money in 2020, and now we have inflation that's higher than it's been in a long time. But the government just basically the biggest lender to the government, I think, is China.
Okay.
So China lends the U.S. a lot of money. So China has something like $2 trillion of American money in our banks because you can't keep American dollars in other banks. And so China is the biggest holder of U.S. I think China practically has more dollars than the U.S. has. So why does China buy dollars? Is because they're constantly buying American products, and they're also buying a lot of oil, and you have to buy oil with dollars. And again, demand for the dollar is what keeps inflation down.
Mm.
But again, we spend $6 trillion a year. This is why the debt ceiling has to be raised all the time. Now, how much do consumers spend? Consumers spend, and this is very important. This is very important because it's related to my solution. Consumer spending is about $16 trillion per year, not counting home buying. So look, we buy our iPhones, our iPads, our Teslas. So here's what my solution is reduce taxes. Right now, taxes are about 30 to 40%, depending on what your income bracket is, depending on how much you make. You pay about 30 to 40% in federal taxes, and then sometimes up to another 15 or 16% in state and city taxes. I think it's the great economist 50 Cent who said that he doesn't earn a dollar of his own money for himself until September or October every year because he pays federal, New York State, and New York City taxes up to like 70% almost.
That's why he only had 50 cents.
Yeah, that's why he only has 50 cents. And he is a great economist. Like no other economist just says it as simply as that. Like Paul Krugman writes all these like 50,000 word articles about the economy that I can't understand. And then 50 Cent just says something simple. I think he's called 50 Cent because he is a great economist, actually.
Yeah.
But that he was first a Nobel level economist, and then he decided to become
50
a
cents.
rapper. Yeah. But so here's my solution. You reduce income taxes, and I'll say the exact numbers that I think work in a little bit. You reduce income taxes to a flat level. Let's just pretend for a second it's 10%. Some people have proposed reducing it to 0%, but I don't think that's realistic. There's a congressman in Georgia right now who basically is saying, get rid of the IRS, no income taxes at all, and make a 30% national sales tax. So when you buy like a newspaper for $1, you have to actually spend $1.30 because the sales tax would be 30%. And that would be much easier to collect. There's no loopholes to avoid the sales tax, and everybody just has to send their sales taxes in to the government. And so, but I think that's a little too high. 30% sales tax.
Right.
I think that would make the prices of everything go up. It would feel like inflation. I don't think it would work. It seems too much. So my goal is make a very small income tax. Again, let's say 10%. That's just standard for everyone. So it's not complicated to calculate. And it could practically eliminate IRS if you just simplify, like you don't charge for Social Security, you don't charge for FICA, all these weird little taxes that you have to pay in your paycheck. You just have 10% flat income tax, and then make a 10% national sales tax. Now, you say to yourself, "Oh, I already pay sales taxes." Well, no, you don't pay any national. There's zero national sales taxes. Sales taxes are state taxes or state sales taxes. So you might have to pay if your state sales tax was 4 or 5%. Now you have to pay 14%, but prices wouldn't necessarily rise. It's small enough. Let's just go over a few things. Some people say, well, that hurts the poor and adds to the rich because the poor, they spend their entire income on food, shelter, clothing, the things they need. When I say poor, I mean, they make below a certain amount, the average salary. So they'll have to spend a bigger portion of their income on sales taxes. But then again, they have to spend less on income taxes. But I have a big solution for them. The solution is that you can get a rebate. Basically, the first $20,000 you consume, you get a rebate at the end of the year for all your sales taxes. So if the sales tax was 10%, and you spent more than $20,000 a year, you would get $2,000 back at the end of the year. So you're not charged any sales tax at all, basically, for the first $20,000 you consume. So
Okay.
I think that makes it so that anybody making less than $50,000, they'll end up paying much less in taxes than they pay now. Would some people still benefit and some people not benefit? Sure, but I think that solves 99% of the problem. The other thing is tourists, people who aren't US citizens, who we get no money, the federal government gets no money from them because they don't pay US income taxes.
Right.
Tourists spend $1.1 trillion per year in the US. So now instead of the federal government getting $0 from tourists, the federal government would get $110 billion from tourists. So this would remove some of the burden of US taxes to foreigners who visit the US. Would this stop people from visiting the US? No, of course not. Like, maybe more people would visit the US than ever because companies would have more money to spend, so they would create more advantages for tourists to come here and see the United States.
Yeah, and 10% is not that big, to be honest, right?
No, I mean, particularly if you're not paying as much income, if your income tax goes from 40% to 10%, you have a lot more disposable income.
Yeah.
So it's a huge, huge, huge cut. The other thing is, now this is not a big amount compared to the federal budget of $6 trillion, but the IRS budget is about $200 billion. They spent $200 billion collecting the $4.5 trillion in income taxes because it's hard to collect, and there's so many loopholes and tax evasions. They have to do, they're passing a law right now where they want to give $80 billion more to the IRS to hire more people to collect money.
80 billion.
Yeah. So my solution is just eliminate the IRS and save on all the money that's used to collect income taxes.
Oh my gosh, I love these clothes. Mizzen and Main. That's Mizzen and Main. It really is the most comfortable work clothes. Travel clothes. I had to travel this whole week. I'm traveling for a week and a half, and I just took Mizzen and Main clothes with me. Close out 2023 in style with comfortable, breathable, packable, and machine washable pieces from Mizzen and Main. As you wrap up your year-end goals, enjoy a Mizzen and Main dress shirt that you can wear confidently. I like that they've very, very just nice, solid colors. I don't really like to get all fancy in patterns and everything, although they do have some pattern shirts, but very comfortable clothes, stretchable pants. It's just super comfortable, but they look professional, and you can wear them casually or professionally. I like some of their flannel shirts or untuck shirts. I love untuck. I never tuck in. So again, whether you're shopping for a special someone or giving yourself the gift you really want, I just buy myself gifts. Mizzen and Main is the perfect gift for any guy who works, travels, and or cares about looking and feeling great. As you could tell by my many photos across the internet, I care about looking fantastic. I'm practically a model. And let's be honest, every guy loves to look great. So again, shop now at mizzenandmain.com and save 20% when you spend $130 or more using promo code James. That's promo code James at Mizzen and Main, Mizzen and Main.com. This is such a valuable service for all business owners, big businesses, small businesses, doesn't matter. I wish I had this in the many different businesses that I've started. Sometimes it seems like your business is humming, but then suddenly you don't understand it. You're starting to fall behind. You're not understanding where your costs are, where your revenues are, where your payments are. Teams are buried in all sorts of like BS work, and you can't seem to close the books. So you need like one dashboard, one source of truth. I'm jealous of this business, NetSuite from Oracle, of course, NetSuite by Oracle. I wish I'd come up with this idea. It's a brilliant concept to have all your business intelligence on one dashboard.
This is why you need to know these three numbers: 37,000, 25, and 1. So 37,000, that's the number of businesses which have upgraded to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the number one cloud financial system, streamlining accounting, financial management, inventory, HR, and more. 25, NetSuite turns 25 this year. That's 25 years of helping businesses do more with less, close their books in days, not weeks, and drive down costs. One, because your business is one of a kind. So you get a customized solution for all of your key performance indicators, your KPIs, in one efficient system with one source of truth. Manage risk, get reliable forecasts, and improve margins. Everything you need to grow all in one place. So right now, download NetSuite's popular KPI checklist designed to give you consistently excellent performance absolutely free at netsuite.com/James. That's netsuite.com/James to get your own KPI checklist. netsuite.com/James.
Don't you still need some sort of body or some people to go for those, still try to avoid taxes or try to escape taxes?
If there's a 10% flat income tax, there's almost no incentive. Okay, right now, about 15% of taxes in this country are unpaid. People just don't pay, or there's tax evasion or whatever. So that's equivalent to $600 billion. So if by reducing the income tax to 10%, people say, screw it, I'm not going to go through the headache of trying to avoid taxes, I'll just pay, it's only 10%, you'll actually end up potentially collecting almost as much money from income taxes and collecting a lot more from this national sales tax. So that's
Right.
why this hybrid tax, maybe you make it a 5% flat tax and 10% national sales tax. This would, again, I don't know if it would collect 4.5 trillion. We'll get to the numbers in a second, but it would drastically increase the number of dollars. Here's the thing too about collecting taxes. It's not like the country has one level of income and then we just collect the same amount every year. You want to do things that grow the economy. It could be the case that doing a strategy like this grows the economy so fast that you end up collecting much more in taxes very quickly. Because again, what grows faster? The tech industry or government? The tech industry grows much faster than government. So if you let companies that are entrepreneurial and are doing a lot of, like, let's say healthcare companies are doing a lot of good for the world, tech companies doing a lot of good for the world, if you let them keep more of their money, they will hire more people, they will create more medicines, they will create more. I mean, the government doesn't create medicine, the companies create medicines. They'll create more automation, which improves productivity, which creates more industries and more jobs and more companies and so on. So you want the companies that grow the economy to retain more money because they are smarter at allocating money. Who would you rather allocate money? A smart allocator, well-known allocator like Warren Buffett, or Congress, which is, I don't want to call them corrupt, but everybody's got their own political agenda. They all have what's called pork, which is they try to get funding for their own districts. And so the money is not allocated in a rational way. It's not allocated in a market-driven way. It's allocated in a very political agenda way. And again, a lot of taxes are unpaid. So it's not like the income tax is that efficient. So personal income is something like $22 trillion. And corporate profits before taxes are something like $3 trillion. So $25 trillion, that's the number we use when we collect the 4.5 trillion in taxes.
Right.
And that 4.5 trillion is a big number. If society had an extra $4 or $3.5 trillion to spend, so many jobs would be created, so many new things would be invented, so much more would be created every single year, that the economy would grow faster, that ultimately, even if taxes were 10% or even lower, you'd end up making a lot more money. So a flat tax of 10% would generate about 2.5 trillion. I mentioned there was 2.5 trillion in profits and income. So a flat tax of 10% would generate $2.5 trillion. A
Okay.
national sales tax, I've called it 12.5%. Okay, it would create $2 trillion. So if you did that, it would completely replace the $4.5 trillion. Now, I know I said 12.5% for a national sales tax. Okay, make it 10%. And my assumption is the economy would grow so fast that you could either lower the national sales tax pretty quickly, or you could lower the national income tax pretty quickly. Because the first benefit of reducing taxes is that people and companies would have more money. But then the second benefit is that they would spend more money. And when they spend money, that means businesses grow faster. Now, don't be anti-business, because anti-business is what hires all the jobs that everybody has. So
Right.
there more jobs would be created. The economy would grow faster than inflation, and all would be good instantly. So again, by the way, we would put some of the burden on the tourists that visit the US. So that relieves the burden somewhat. Now, here, again, let's say the lower tax rate plus a rebate. If you have a 12.5% sales tax and you're letting people get money back for the first $20,000 they consume, that means the one purpose of a new IRS would be to give back $2,500 per year to a family of four that needs the money to survive. So on average, people making up to from $0 to $200,000 per year would make more money, significantly more money under this plan. There would be less headaches and stress and suicides and anxiety around tax season, which is happening
Yep.
right now. Everybody just paid their taxes April 15th. Corporations would hire more people. The economy would grow much faster. And if the economy grows faster, we could then reduce income taxes and sales taxes much more. So, would this encourage people to spend less since prices paid would go up because of the sales tax? I don't think so, because there would be higher take home pay.
Yeah, people will spend more, right? Like I know if that happens, I would definitely spend more because there's a lot of stuff that I want to buy, or I might want a healthier food because it's crazy because it's so much more expensive to be healthy than go to a McDonald's or go to a Little Caesars to buy pizza.
Is that what you do? You go to Little Caesars? That's a very particular pizza place.
It is because when I was in New York, right? New York's expensive, right? So when I was in New York and Florida, I used to live across the street from Little Caesars, and I had no money. I have no money, even though my rent was like $600. But I still I just graduated. I have no income whatsoever. I would go to Little Caesars, get a $10 Caesar pizza bundle. For $10, give you a large pizza, breadsticks, and a bottle of Pepsi. I would ration my pizza for 3 days. So $10 for 6 meals, I would just eat pizza. 2 pizza per meal and some breadsticks. So 2 pizza per meal and 1 breadsticks.
Yeah, well, it's definitely like you see this in poor neighborhoods. The rates of diabetes and obesity are much higher
Yep.
because it's hard to get healthy food. Like they don't have Whole Foods or health food stores in poor neighborhoods. I think this would solve a lot of those issues as well. And again, speaking about areas with lower income, the first $20,000 gets rebated to you anyway, so you're
Right.
not being charged at all anyway. The first $20,000 for anybody, including you, me, Jeff Bezos, and somebody who makes no income. The first $20,000 of consumption of your sales tax gets rebated to you. So again, right now, there's a bill going through Congress which would eliminate all income taxes and put a national sales tax of 30%, which also, by the way, would replace the $4.5 trillion completely. But my gut tells me that 30% is too high. It just
It's
feels
a
high.
lot. Yeah.
A low flat income tax does we're used to income taxes. We don't mind. We'd be happy. We'd do a dance in the streets if you made an income tax of 10% instead of 30 or 40%. And because this is designed to make the economy grow, if the economy grows, you need to have fewer taxes so you can reduce that sales tax or income tax as you decide eventually anyway, maybe even in just a year or two. Now, the other thing you can do the economy can either make more money or the government could spend less. So the other thing I would do is spend less. Now, the two biggest expenditures of the US government are Social Security and defense. Now, we need Social Security and we need defense, but let's just take a look for a second. Social Security, kicks in. You can opt to kick in your Social Security at the age of 62 years old, and 65 is usually when it starts. But when Social Security was developed in 1935, the average life expectancy was 8 years less, 8 years lower than it is now. So it makes sense that the age, and this is going to be a very unpopular opinion, so it's probably why it's never been proposed. So maybe there's a way to do this, maybe there isn't a way, or I'll get to that in a second. But the initial proposal is don't let Social Security kick in at 62, started at the age of 70. Life expectancy has increased 8 years, so add 8 years to when Social Security kicks in.
Isn't that what happened? Sorry, isn't that what happened in Paris? Isn't that's why the protests happened in Paris?
Maybe that makes sense. See, that's the thing. It's a very unpopular decision, but here's how I would do it so there's no protest. Is A, don't kick it in immediately. Have it phase in. So anybody who's like 50 years old right now, you can argue I'm saying this because I'm over 50, but whatever. Make it any age, an arbitrary age. Pick an age where anybody above that age, there's no changes to when they can get Social Security. But if you're 25 years old now, okay, now you have to wait till 70 before you can get Social Security. Remember, you're not paying Social Security tax anymore in my plan. It's just a flat income tax. So someone who's 25 will say, okay, I'd rather have money, make the money and save the money now than keep contributing to something for when I'm 70 years old. So younger people are going to be more okay with this and won't protest. So we just have to phase in, and we don't punish the people who've already been contributing so much to Social Security. If you do this, if you just raise the age by which people could take Social Security, you would save $800 billion.
Wow.
That's a huge number. So you go from 6 trillion to 5.2 trillion in spending. Now, let's talk about defense. Reduce manpower. Like we're in like 100 countries. We have military bases, and obviously there are a lot of wars we could avoid, and maybe we need to think a little bit more about what wars we get involved in. Like we were in Iraq for 18 years and Afghanistan for 18 years, and it was just a disaster.
Yeah, if you have a baby, then your kids will probably grow up as a teenagers now.
Actually, that's true. Molly was born the month we invaded Iraq, and now she's an adult. So, but anyway, if you reduce manpower by 20%, and again, all of those people could easily find jobs in the private sector, particularly if the economy is growing. But you would or if you force our allies, which depend on our military budget, like NATO is largely funded by the United States. If you force allies to put some in the bill, U.S. could save about $1 trillion a
Wow.
year. So that gets us just doing those two things. And by the way, I'm just picking those things because they're the largest expenses, but you could start going line by line through the Department of Education, the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and on and on. Each area has huge expenses that could be cut. But I'm just talking about those two things would reduce the federal budget enough that the tax plan I'm proposing would completely feed you would not have a deficit every year like we have now. Now, a deficit's not so bad if you could borrow money and print money. In fact, there's so much demand for US dollars, we don't mind lending money at 0% interest rates, particularly if there's a little bit of inflation. That means when people have to pay us back, or that means when we have to pay back, when the US has to pay back, the money is worth less than when we borrowed it. So it's not so bad to have debt, by the way, if you're a country. It's different than individual debt where it's much
Right.
more painful. Country is better to have long-term debt. So it means the government could actually spend more money in this plan and spend it more wisely and then allocate it better. So again, but just those two initiatives, defense and Social Security, you could balance the budget, and in the tax plan with a 10% flat income tax and then a 10 to 12.5% national sales tax with the plan to bring it down as the economy grows. More people would have money in their pocket. There would be more jobs, more inventions. The economy would grow faster. the budget would be balanced. People would trust the US more as a reserve currency, so that would keep inflation down. All of these things. And this is the problem that is biggest on people's minds. If you ask anybody, a third of people say the money in their bank account and their wallet is their biggest problem, and then next is immigration at 11% compared to 33%. So this is the biggest problem facing this country, and yet we do nothing every single year. We do nothing at all to solve it. We spend more money, we tax more people. The rich, by the way, don't get taxed. Like, yes, Elon Musk says he's paid the most taxes of any individual in history, but in general, like someone like Warren Buffett, he doesn't really make an income. He keeps his money in stocks. You only get taxed when you sell the stocks. Now, someone like AOC, who's has the worst knowledge of the economy of anybody on the planet, and by the way, she is perhaps the greatest politician on the planet because she's used her voice so powerfully at such a young age. She's so talented at that, but she is literally the worst person in the planet for understanding the economy. She thinks you could tax when unrealized gains, meaning, let's say, Jay, you own Apple stock and it goes up. Even if you don't sell it, you should get taxed. Well, what if it goes down next year? You don't get your
Yeah.
money back. So that's why they only tax when you sell the stock. But people like AOC are proposing you tax unrealized gains. That's called unrealized gains when you don't sell it and you're still taxed. That's ridiculous. That would destroy the economy because nobody would then
Right.
be interested in funding. The whole reason for the stock market is not for gamblers to make money, but it's for companies to have incentive and potentially raise money to fund more, hiring more people, starting new companies, inventing new products, and on and on. That's the reason for a stock exchange, hedging risk, and so on. So you can't just use everything. People are trying to hire more people and invent more things because there's incentives to do that. And you can't do that if you're constantly fighting with people who want to tax every single little thing you do. So the system I propose, it would keep more money in people's pocket. It's the biggest problem in the country, and nobody is trying to solve it except in these ridiculous ways, like a 30% national sales tax, which is going in the right direction, but just is a weird, crazy way to do it. And they know it's not going to pass anyway, so that's why they're proposing it. My system's more rational. It keeps an income tax and introduces a sales tax, and it has rebates. It's not a regressive tax. It doesn't hurt just the lower income versus higher income. And if on top of it you reduce spending in these very obvious ways, but might not be politically, satisfying, you would balance the budget. And again, I describe the Social Security in a way that would be politically satisfying. Like, just don't hurt people who have already paid Social Security taxes because they're expecting it at 62. Pick an age. I don't care what age. Anyway, that is the first and most important issue. I would deal with it. I don't think anyone's ever proposed a hybrid sales income tax like I'm doing.
Like, why not? I'm just curious, why not?
Because people take extremes, and also because I would say a good 30% of the country is probably has the economic knowledge of an AOC. She represents the worst of the worst in terms of economic knowledge, and then there's a whole group of people who think higher taxes are good because the government is good. But you have to ask yourself, how is the government spending the money? Do you approve of how the government is spending the money? Like, Jeff Bezos is not everyone's favorite billionaire, but he created the largest store in the world that all of us use every day. And it helped the world so much during the pandemic. And it's created so many jobs. And it's also created side hustles and more income for tens of millions of people. Like, forget about Jeff Bezos. Don't, somebody very smart told me, don't ever look at what's in someone else's wallet. Look at what's in your wallet. And let's just focus on making your wallet fatter and bigger. And don't worry so much about the people who are inventing the new economy. And every year is a new economy. So don't hurt those people. And just ask yourself, would you rather, smart, creative, entrepreneurial people allocate the money? And of course, we would, keep all the law enforcement, no corruption, nothing illegal, regulate industries if you need to, but don't inhibit the most creative people in the economy and give the money to the post office. Nothing against the post office. I'm just using it as an example, but don't give it to the least creative bureaucrats in the country. Give it to the creatives to figure out how to grow the economy, and it'll work. That this plan will just work. And every dollar that the government doesn't spend is spent in private industry, and that's what keeps people alive. So that's it. That's policy number one.
Probably the
And
most important.
it's so
Yeah.
important. You don't even need practically any other policy. Okay. Now, you could look at immigration in the context of, will it help grow the economy or not? Now, you have to also be, humanitarian and help people who work hard in this country and, who came in legally. You have to really think about all the nuances on the illegal immigration. It's a very complicated issue. There's a lot of issues that are much smaller in people's minds that are very complicated and very nuanced. This one is so big and so important, and yet nobody deals with it. And that's what's disturbing to me. And that's why this country could fail, is because no one's dealing with it. Like right now, we're solving higher inflation by raising interest rates so much that it's going to cause a recession. That's not the way to solve this problem. But anyway, that's all I have to say about this issue. Altucher 2024.
Let's
go. Make it not a joke. Make it real. But, for now, it's a joke. But the issues are real.
Yeah. And if anyone has more questions to ask James, go to jamesaltuchershow.com/askaltucher. You will greeted by a Google form, and then just, input your questions, and then we will answer it.
Or you could tweet it. Just tweet to @JAltucher. Like, follow me and then tweet to @JAltucher, and I'll be able to see it.
This is a good one. And would I be I can't hold any government positions, can I?
Yeah, you could hold everything except president and vice president.
Oh, maybe I would be Speaker of House or whatever.
You could, or that's hard because you have to get elected. I'll just appoint you like a Supreme Court justice.
You
don't even have to be a lawyer. You don't have to be a lawyer to be a Supreme Court justice.
Is there any Asian Supreme Court justice? I don't think so, because they're
I don't think there's ever been an Asian Supreme Court judge. I think you need to be on the Supreme Court, Jay. You're a very fair person.
I'm pretty fair. If I have $1, I would give someone 50 cents, another one 50 cents.
Yeah, even on the federal judges on the U.S. Court of Appeals, only 10 are Asian Americans, and there's no Asian who's ever been
Supreme Court.
Supreme
Why not?
Court.
People are like, hey, we have to have diversity and equality. And also, there's so many good benefit to have an Asian Supreme Court justice, right? Like the great comedian Ronnie Chang said one time, if you have an Asian president, we work for you guys on Christmas. We even cook for you guys on Christmas.
Yeah, Ronnie Chang's very funny. CHIENG. I highly recommend everybody listen to his stuff. So, all right, Jay, thanks so much for organizing this podcast. And until next time, there's a lot of great questions that are left to be answered on the Ask Altucher queue.
Thank you so much, James, and have a wonderful day.
Entresto, sacubitril valsartan tablets, is the #1 heart failure brand prescribed by cardiologists and has helped over 1 million people with heart failure. It's a prescription medicine that treats adults with long-lasting chronic heart failure and works better when the heart cannot pump a normal amount of blood to the body.
Don't take Entresto if pregnant. It can cause harm or death to an unborn baby. Don't take Entresto with an ACE inhibitor or aliskiren, or if you've had angioedema with an ACE or ARB. Don't take with aliskiren or within 36 hours of taking an ACE inhibitor. The most serious side effects are angioedema, low blood pressure, kidney problems, or high blood potassium. Angioedema is swelling of your face, lips, tongue, and throat that may cause death. If it causes difficulty breathing, get emergency help.
Ask your doctor about Entresto. To learn more, visit support.entresto.com or call 833-446-6699. For pricing, visit Entresto.com/cost. If you can't afford your medication, Novartis may be able to help.
Diving deep into your passions has never been easier. Thanks to Amazon Prime. You get all-in-one access to the things you need, so you can get more out of the things you love. With a range of services including Prime Video, Amazon Music, and Prime Fast free shipping. Amazon Prime is like your personal mission control for all the things that inspire. From shopping and streaming to saving, it's on Prime. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to get more out of whatever you're into. It's on Prime.